So how about we take a look at part 2 of the Rocky Mountain Blacksmithing Conference, Forging an Axe. Just like part 1, this was filmed as it happened without any editing after the fact. I've done very little editing just to put it on YouTube. And this will be part 2 of 4 parts, and it will continue our look at forging a traditionally styled wrapped eye axe with a forge welded in tool steel bit. Enjoy. Oh, that's perfect. That's not perfect. So we just finished peening this out now. I'm going to kind of blend that fuller mark. You got to go over the far edge and hook that fuller over. So there we have that offset to both sides. And we are starting to define the ears. I do see some axes with round ears. You could leave it like that. I don't like round ears. I like them pointy. So I'm going to do just a little bit on the ears, turn it around, draw out the other side, and then I'll dress both sets of ears so they look the same. I don't know if that's hot enough yet. Yeah, probably okay for this. So for this, you just stand it up on the edge of the anvil and work both sides. And you can work it on this side. Yep, it's all purified. We got a pair of pickup tongs. That's hard to pick up off of this floor. Stay. Okay. Thank you. So that starts sort of putting a point on there. We're going to do more, but I'm going to turn it around. Like I say, if I work both eyes, then I have a better visual sense of whether or not they're the same. And if I put the points on this, then maybe I don't draw the other one out the same before I point it. Good? Okay. I kind of mentioned that the first place I saw an axe like this done was on the woodwright shop. If you go back in my incentive to become a blacksmith, that's actually kind of where it goes back to. I never thought I wanted to be a blacksmith, but I saw this show on TV once called The Woodwright Shop, and he was doing this really interesting woodworking where he took a log and he started splitting it up, and then he started hitting it with an axe, and after a while he's got some piece of furniture or something sort of interesting. And I said, wow, that's pretty cool. And I bought his book and thought, yeah, that's pretty cool. And then I started looking for old tools, froes and axes and adzes and planes, and in the 80s those were really hard to find. None of the antique stores in my area had them. eBay wasn't out there. You couldn't shop online. But there was this chapter in his book about blacksmithing. And I thought, I took metal shop in high school. They had a forge and an anvil. I made a cold chisel. I can do this. And I went to the library and I bought a bunch of books, and next thing you know, I'm collecting blacksmithing tools because I was lucky enough to find those in our area, even though I couldn't find woodworking tools. So now for about 30 years, I have been more of a blacksmith. I still hardly ever do any woodworking. I'm still interested. I still like the idea of traditional woodworking. But I set out to make woodworking tools, and it's just in the last few years that I'm actually making woodworking tools finally. It was not as easy as it looked. So that's kind of what gave me my kick in the pants to learn blacksmithing. So same process on the other side. So that starts to look more like what we're after. Some people refer to these as bow tie axes because before you fold it up, they sort of look like a bow tie. If you sort of study, study may be the right word, hunt around for information on axes, you can find all sorts of really interesting axes that are nothing more than a forge welding project. The eye is one or two pieces because they're long eyes, and they weld a piece on here, then you weld another piece for the blade, and then you weld another piece for the cutting edge, and these axes that look impossible to make. Even this, I can't imagine. I used to think, how do you punch that? How do you do that? Well, if you wrap them, that's not that hard other than it's a whole lot of steel. But conceptually, it's no different. And you see the German goosewing axes. They really look like they are not that hard to do other than it's a lot of forge welding and you got to get the forge welds right. So hopefully I'll learn how to do that in another year or two. Oh yeah. So that's about where that other eye was, and I've got enough heat left. I'm going to start evening that up a little bit. So those are getting to be pretty darn close. I'm just looking. Even though you're tending fire, I can't resist coming over here and playing with it. I also tend to do these in a gas forge, just because I can get an even heat and get the whole thing up to welding heat at one time, and things a little easier or a little more reliable. I like working in coal because it's more fun. But I can work two of these back and forth while one's heating. I can work on the other one when I'm at home. Now here's where I'm going to go back to the Hammer's Blow article. I've always just done these here at the anvil. He works them over the horn with a farrier's rounding hammer, and I think it makes them more graceful here on the axe to do it that way. But But that gives you just a little bit of a rounded ear. And it's just a little concave, and I think that just adds a little bit more grace to the axe. It's kind of hard to see, and I'll admit that I'm going to clean that up on the grinder anyways. We could spend all day filing it. I am more of a fan of filing all the time, but not for something this big. Yeah, let's leave that on there. Lately I've been making a lot of hinges. Lots and lots of hinges. And I keep thinking, now how's an easier way to do this? You know, you gotta cut the eye out, you gotta make one leaf for the hinge fit the other leaf for the hinge. And I have finally realized that the easiest way to do it is just to get your hacksaw and your files and your chisels. Trying to figure out ways to jig that up and cut it ahead of time, and the thought of, well, I could buy a milling machine for $5,000 and spend 20 minutes setting it up, or I could just cut it. And it's way easier to just cut it. Don't be afraid of hacksaws and files. And we were in here the other day working on the sundial, and somebody, sorry, I'm going to sell you out here, says, how do you use this bandsaw? So I handed him a hacksaw, and that's how we cut it. By the way, Matt, you could use new blades in your hacksaw. They're kind of dull. This anvil's a little jumpy. If you can keep your anvil tied down, you'll be a lot happier. So that's really all you need to do to those eyes to get the ears on them. If you want bigger ears, you can draw it out and make it a little bit thinner. The key at this point is that they're the same, and I found this really neat pair of wing dividers laying around. I do a lot of these and just figure I did the same thing to both sides. They must be the same. That's not always true. So if you can check one side, and check the other side. Okay, this side needs to draw out just a hair more. If you fold that up and it's crooked, you can sort of fix it, kinda, but it's probably easier to fix it now. I'll admit I made a tool for that I can put in the vise. And I can hang the axe over it to square up that pole, but it's easier to do it now. That's my drift gun. Yeah. Yep. I'm leaving stuff all over the place here. Ooh, there's a breeze. That will be hotter. Where's the piece that has two axes in one? Okay. Okay, so this one's only got one ear. That's this axe. And actually, I like this. I like the straighter top. I don't know why. To try and forge this way means that you have to thin this eye in the other direction, and that makes the axe head curl over. I forge the ears exactly the same way to get this, and I cut it off. There may be another way to do that. I've never been able to peen anything all to one side. It's probably possible, but I've never pulled it off myself. So I think it's easier to just take a hot cut and cut that extra ear off. It's not too hard to forge most of the blade to one side, because then you can set it on the anvil and straighten it. But Peter and I will have a talk later. He'll probably tell me, you know, that's really easy to do. All you got to do is get a left-handed widget. So we're just going to work this a little bit, thin it out a little more, and try and make this side the same as the other side. Also keep in mind that this side's hotter. It's going to shrink just a little bit. I don't know that that's a big deal in this scale, but I've had it bite me before. So you can look and see. I think that's still a hair smaller than the other side is, so we're going to... This is like fixing a table leg that's a little bit too short. You cut one off and then the other one's a little too long, and you cut the other one off, and that's better. So you can see that. That looks, hopefully you can see that on the camera, but those eyes are now about the same. Now, while I don't like to thin this all the way out at this stage, I want to thin it out a little bit just to give myself a head start. And because my cutting edge is probably a little less than a half. But I like all that extra meat for the forge weld. And we may have to check for clinkers and make sure that's a good clean fire before we get to the weld part. So here's the cutting edge we just did. It's still a little hot. We can pass that around. I'll need that in a couple of minutes. So I got the after lunch sleepy period. Bring half the fire over there with me. Now I'm just going to peen this out. Yeah, so it's about 3/8 thick. Nothing magical here. That's just kind of an arbitrary thing because it seemed like it made my life easier at some point, so I still do it. Now it's a little bit too big for that pair of tongs, so we'll grab it with that pair of tongs. Excuse me. I think there's a sneeze in there. You guys are awfully quiet. I don't think it's ready yet. I'm just going to put those on there.
Seems respectful on this side, just quiet on your side.
Okay. I bet it was in the floor.
This is one side that's
It's just a spare? Okay. I wasn't holding the horn on, I hope. Yeah. And certainly we can pass any more of these around if you haven't seen them in the gallery. There's one here that's it. That's got to stay over there. What's that? I refer to it as a bearded axe. Somebody that's more knowledgeable might say, oh no, a bearded axe has some other characteristic. But for my money, that's a bearded axe. There are lots of different... if you scrounge around looking for axe patterns, there are, and I meant to print them out, but my computer was down before we came. There are dozens and dozens. There are sheets that just different profiles of axes with their nomenclature of this is a Missouri axe, and this is a Kentucky axe, and this is an East Alaskan, and just lots and lots of different variety in axe shapes. And if you look even on eBay and find people are starting to sell European antiques, and you find all these Hungarian and Russian and stuff axes, they're just more shapes than you can imagine. Okay, so now those pretty much match. The next trick is to fold this up. And it's kind of an unruly fold job. We want pretty much the heat right in the center of the eye if we can. You end up with a whole lot more material hot than you need to. So you got to work at it a little bit to close it up. And the real key here is that the shoulders on the inside of the eye line up. If those don't line up, the only way to fix it is to file the one that's fat later. If this thing is a little out of position, it's easier to fix. Now, ideally, you've made it perfectly symmetrical, and it folds up perfectly. Look at the filth. I can sign my name in the table. What? I'm trying not to. I got to get in there. Ooh. There's an axe in there somewhere. I saw it. Yep. See, I was just hoping it was hot. So for those of you who don't know me, currently I'm a firefighter for the city of Aurora. I work about 20 hours a week in the blacksmith shop and have thought I was running a business for about 20 years. And only in the last few years have I realized, oh, this is what it's like to actually make a little bit of money. So I'm actually making some income now in the blacksmith shop and thinking of retiring from the fire department and hoping to supplement my pension enough making things like axes and hinges. So, starving artists. Yeah, I'm hoping it's not starving. I'm hoping my customers would gladly buy more things if I told them, yes, I can do that in a week instead of 3 to 4 weeks. It's still not hot. But this is the kind of work I prefer to do. I've never been into railings and staircases and window grills and gates and things like that. Just don't really... I like to look at them. I really appreciate the work that goes into them, but I don't have the ambition to build a spiral staircase that takes 2 years to put together. That's better. And not a lot better. It's a little better. Now if you're using box jaw tongs like this, put the box on the outside of the axe while you do this. It'll be easier to get off later. Now let's see if we can just get the eye part hot.
Gas forge in your shop?
I use both. If I'm doing things that require smaller forge welds, I really prefer the coal forge because you can get so much better control on the heat. For axes, I like the gas forge because I can bring a nearly finished axe back up to welding heat very easily and get the whole thing at an even heat. And I can also work on 2 axes at once and not worry about burning them up. So right now I would be forging the alternate axe and being a little bit more efficient, but if I do that in the coal forge, I always burn up the other piece.
But you wouldn't have time to tell us about it.
What?
You wouldn't have time to tell
Right.
us about it.
I have a Sandia forge. Yeah. Yeah, we're 6,500 feet, so I have to run the thing at about 22 pounds of pressure and eats the gas pretty fast, but it definitely welds and I never burn anything up in it. So it's pretty nice.
You say 26?
22 is what I run it at to weld. I don't run it at that day in and day out. Okay, so now we have to get that pair of tongs back out of there before we get them stuck. One of the best ways to hold these is with hoop tongs. And that gives you a pretty good secure way to hold that while you do the rest of this. The hardest part of holding the axe is when you're drifting the eye after you finish the blade because it's tapered and it's sort of hard to hold on to. So I'll try not to drop it in anybody's lap. You could probably hold these with hammer eye tongs, and these kind of curved pickup tongs aren't bad. Those actually don't, they're a little floppy, but it's not going to fall out of them. Yeah, we get a little hotter. Now what I'm going to do first is I'm going to bring the heel of this together, and I want to weld the heel initially before I put the edge in. If you put the edge in before doing the heel, it tends to leave the heel open, and then it's kind of hard to get that heel a good weld. I really like a good weld right there. I don't want to see a cold shut there. It probably doesn't hurt anything if there's a little one, but it makes me nervous. I'm always afraid I'm going to split it open. So the better a weld I can get there, the happier I am. Are we hot yet? So now I'm just trying to even up the 2 sides of the eye and get this as close to the same as I can. Invariably, there's always some difference between the front of the axe, or the one side and the other, in spite of my best efforts. And I'll do some grinding and trimming and fiddling and fussing and all that other stuff. So we need to get that ready for welding. I tend to just use borax for flux. It really melts and flows down in there very well. And I probably tend to overflux, which is a bad habit of mine because it really doesn't do you any good if you do, but I'm always paranoid that there's going to be a cold shutdown in there, and if I can get some flux in there to liquefy all the scale, then maybe I can get all the crap out of there. Okay, let's not burn it.
So this borax on the bag,
It's whatever Matt had. I don't know. Is Matt here?
has it already been melted down and rebounded?
I'm assuming this is 20 mule team borax from the grocery store. I have bought anhydrous borax, but yep, there you go. There's the commercial. But I think unless you put your anhydrous borax in an airtight container and open it up and use it really fast, it's only anhydrous for the first day. And so you might as well use regular borax. Just going to turn it over.
John, are you laying that in there flat and then doing it at 180, or are you on the...
I'm laying it in flat because I feel like I have less chance of an ear being low in the fire and burning it off. If you stand it on edge, you have the advantage that some of that flux might bring some of the scale out and flow out. But you also have a chance when you do the steel, if it's not in there really solid, that when you pull your axe out, the steel won't be there anymore. So it's just the way I do it. I don't know if it's certainly not the only way, and there's an argument for either direction. But I think you've got to keep it moving in the fire, or only one side of it gets hot and then it doesn't weld. I tried using 01 for the tool steel part, and maybe I just had a bad day, but I was burning the 01 out of it before the mild steel got hot enough to weld. And so I don't know if 01 just burns at a really low temperature, or if I was just having a bad day in the forge. But after a couple axes, I pulled it out, and there was just a little, well, the whole steel fell out, just about half of it burned out. And I never even saw any sparks coming out of the fire. So I don't know what the deal was with that, so I quit using 01. Having this stuff under there. It's getting close. Now, as far as forge welding and sparks, a lot of people say, oh, look for the sparks. If you see sparks, you went too far. I like to look that the metal is the same color as the coke bed that it's laying in, if you've got a good hot fire, and that's plenty hot enough. If it starts sparking, you've gone too far, and if the steel, when you're doing the edge, is sparking, you've probably burned a lot of the carbon out of your steel, and you're not going to get as good a product. Now, you don't have to shut that off. I'm just looking to see where we're at fire-wise. Good clean fire. This anvil's a little further away from the forge than I would like. No, I'll still do it over here. My anvil's right here, so I only have to go this far. Yeah, I'll leave that eye exposed so I can grab it. We are getting close, I think. These are also really good knuckle burners. There's a lot of radiant heat coming off of this axe, and if I get tired of it, I'll put a glove on. The only problem with a glove is oftentimes that's where the scale goes, is right down the open cuff of the glove, and that's even worse. Keep the blower on. This one more flip, and I think we'll be there.
This fire, I guess it's so much ash.
Oh, it does, yeah.
So I just don't want to spray it in your face.
Yeah. So I'll be welding. It's open on the end, which means, and I'm starting at my end, So the flux and the crud's going that way for those of you wearing shorts in the front row. Just a thought. No. No, I just don't want you to blame me for not warning you. Okay, let's see if that's hot enough. Okay. Thank you for watching part 2. We'll take another break here and pick it up later with part 3. Remember, there's going to be 4 parts total, so try to pace this out so it doesn't bore you too much. I know it can be kind of hard to watch these full videos, but it really gives you an idea how long this stuff takes and what it would be like to attend a conference of this sort. If this interests you, there is a link down in the description for the Rocky Mountain Rocky Mountain Smiths, and Rocky Mountain Smiths has these DVDs of these demos, which is where I got this. This is republished with their permission. Since it was my demo, they said yes, I may use it however I'd like, so I'm sharing it with you. But the other ones are available for sale on the Rocky Mountain Smiths website, and you can go there and find over 20 years worth of demonstrations from some of the world's best blacksmiths, and probably some people you've never heard of, but there's a lot of great content there. Some of the early ones are very rough, very poor sound, only one camera, but they are still worth watching because there's some great information there. So I hope this was helpful to you. Hope you found it interesting and didn't fall asleep while it was going on. Love it if you give it a thumbs up. Love it if you hit the subscribe button. But then get out to your shop, make something, stay safe, wear your safety glasses, and we will see you for the next one.